Picture a spice so precious that kings would wage wars to control it, merchants would risk their lives to trade it, and empires would rise and fall in its pursuit. In the bustling markets of medieval Europe, a single pound of these aromatic treasures could be worth more than a commoner's yearly wages. But in 1498, one daring Portuguese navigator would forever change the balance of global power. In a journey that would rewrite the maps of the known world, Vasco da Gama accomplished what many thought impossible, discovering a direct sea route to India. This single voyage would shatter centuries-old trade monopolies, unleash an age of exploration that would reshape continents, and ignite a commercial revolution that still echoes in our modern global economy. From the moment his ship set sail from Lisbon, da Gama wasn't just charting a course through unknown waters. He was steering the world toward a new age of commerce, conquest, and connection. It was a journey that would transform Portugal from a modest kingdom on the edge of Europe into the master of the world's most valuable trade routes, establishing an empire that would stretch across 4 continents. Welcome to the story of how spices changed the world and how one man's determination to reach the source of these precious commodities would alter the course of human history forever. On the morning of July 8, 1497, the waters of the Tagus River in Lisbon witnessed a moment that would change the course of history. As the first rays of sunlight painted the sky, 4 ships stood ready in the harbor: the São Gabriel, the São Rafael, the Berrio, and a sturdy storage vessel. Their wooden hulls creaked with anticipation, loaded with supplies for a journey into the unknown. At the helm stood Vasco da Gama, a 37-year-old navigator who, despite his relative obscurity, had been handpicked by King Manuel I for perhaps the most ambitious maritime expedition ever attempted. The crowds gathering at the docks that morning could hardly comprehend the magnitude of what they were witnessing. These weren't just ships departing port. This was Portugal's boldest gamble yet. For centuries, the lucrative spice trade had been the exclusive domain of Arab merchants and Venetian middlemen who controlled the overland routes from India through the Middle East. The Portuguese dream was audacious: to break this monopoly by finding a direct sea route to India by circumnavigating Africa. Da Gama's mission wasn't just about navigation, it was about defying the established world order. With 170 men under his command, state-of-the-art navigational instruments, and ships built with the latest Portuguese naval technology, he was about to attempt what many considered impossible. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Success would mean untold riches and power for Portugal. Failure would mean death in unknown waters. And now, dear viewers, you're invited to join us on this extraordinary journey that reshaped the world. Want to discover how this relatively unknown captain outmaneuvered ancient trade empires? Eager to learn how a small European kingdom managed to establish the world's first truly global trade route? Join us at Modern Age Chronicles, where history comes alive through stories of courage, ambition, and discovery. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up to embark with us on more epic voyages that change the course of human history. This is just the beginning of an incredible series where we'll uncover the secrets, struggles, and triumphs that shaped our modern world. To truly understand the voyage that changed the world, we must first understand the man who led it. Vasco da Gama was far from the romanticized hero often portrayed in historical accounts. Born around 1460 in Sines, a small coastal town in Portugal, he was the son of Estevão da Gama, a minor provincial knight who served as governor of Sines. While his family held noble status, they were far from the upper echelons of Portuguese society, making young Vasco acutely aware of the importance of social advancement. Da Gama emerged as a product of his time, pragmatic, hardened, and unflinchingly determined. His early years in the Portuguese Navy had shaped him into a skilled navigator, but more importantly, they had cultivated in him the ruthless efficiency that would later define his leadership. Unlike his contemporary Christopher Columbus, who often spoke of divine mission and glory, da Gama was a calculated strategist who saw the Indian expedition primarily as a means to an end: power, wealth, and social elevation. His selection to lead the expedition surprised many at court, as he was relatively unknown compared to other Portuguese navigators of the time. However, King Manuel I saw in him the perfect combination of qualities needed for such a perilous mission: naval expertise, unwavering determination, and most importantly, a fierce loyalty to the crown, driven by personal ambition. The crew under his command reflected the harsh realities of 15th century maritime exploration. His 170 men were not romantic adventurers, but a carefully selected mix of hardened sailors, experienced navigators, and skilled craftsmen. Among them were some of Portugal's finest pilots, including Pero de Alonque, who had previously sailed with Bartholomew Dias around the Cape of Good Hope. The crew also included interpreters like Fernão Martins, who spoke Arabic, and criminal convicts who were offered pardons in exchange for undertaking this dangerous mission. These men underwent rigorous training before the voyage, learning to handle the sophisticated navigational instruments of the time, mastering the art of celestial navigation, and preparing for the harsh realities of long-distance seafaring. They knew they would face months of cramped quarters, scarce provisions, disease, and the constant threat of death by storm, shipwreck, or hostile encounters. Da Gama's relationship with his crew was not one of beloved leadership, but of iron-fisted authority. Historical accounts describe him as a stern commander who didn't hesitate to use harsh discipline to maintain order. This uncompromising approach would later prove both an asset and a liability during the expedition's most challenging moments. His brother, Paulo da Gama, served as captain of the São Rafael and proved to be a valuable second-in-command, offering a slightly more diplomatic counterpoint to Vasco's often brutal pragmatism. Together, they would form the core leadership that would guide this unprecedented expedition through unknown waters and alien cultures. This was the real Vasco da Gama, not a noble hero of romantic tales, but a complex figure of ambition, determination, and often ruthless practicality. His character, forged by the social realities of 15th century Portugal and tempered by years of naval experience, would prove instrumental in accomplishing what many thought impossible, even if the methods he employed would sometimes shock both his contemporaries and modern historians alike. Step aboard a Portuguese caravel of 1497, and you're entering a floating world that combines cutting-edge naval technology with the harsh realities of medieval seafaring. The São Gabriel, da Gama's flagship, was a masterpiece of naval engineering, stretching 27 meters in length with a displacement of 120 tons. These vessels weren't the simple fishing boats of earlier generations. They were sophisticated machines of exploration and warfare, representing the pinnacle of European shipbuilding technology. The overwhelming first sensation upon boarding would be the pungent cocktail of smells. The sharp, acrid scent of tar used to seal the wooden hulls mingles with the briny ocean air. Below decks, the musty odor of damp wood combines with the stench of the bilge, where seawater, refuse, and rat droppings create a noxious soup. Yet there are sweeter notes too, the aromatic samples of spices stored in cedar chests, the leather of navigation tools, and the ever-present burning tallow candles. The ships themselves were marvels of craftsmanship. Built from carefully selected Portuguese oak and pine, each timber was seasoned for years before construction. The hull planks were joined using the carvel building technique, creating a smoother, more hydrodynamic surface than earlier vessels. The revolutionary triangular lateen sails, made from heavy linen treated with fish oils for waterproofing, allowed the ships to sail closer to the wind than any previous European vessel. The deck bustles with constant activity. Sailors, dressed in coarse wool and linen garments, navigate the complex web of hemp ropes that control the sails. Their clothes, initially sturdy, would gradually deteriorate over the months at sea, patched and repatched until they barely held together. Their feet are either bare or protected by simple leather shoes, both options dangerous on the constantly wet wooden decks. The weaponry on board reflects the expedition's dual nature as both exploration and potential warfare. Bronze cannons, each weighing several tons, stand ready on their wooden carriages. Crossbows, arquebuses, and steel swords are stored carefully, protected from the corrosive sea air with regular applications of animal fat. Gunpowder is kept in sealed barrels, protected from both moisture and accidental sparks. Life aboard revolves around the daily routines of navigation and survival. The ship's pilot uses sophisticated instruments: the quadrant for measuring stellar altitudes, the astrolabe for latitude calculations, and the magnetic compass for maintaining course. Charts and rutters, navigation manuals, are precious possessions, kept carefully in the captain's cabin. The food situation is particularly grim. The daily diet consists primarily of salted cod, dried beans, and hardtack biscuits, often already infested with weevils when loaded. Fresh water, stored in wooden casks, quickly becomes stagnant and foul-tasting, forcing the crew to drink wine or beer as safer alternatives. What few fresh provisions they start with, such as oranges and lemons, quickly run out, leaving the crew vulnerable to scurvy. Below decks, space is brutally cramped. The ordinary sailors sleep on the open deck or in hammocks strung wherever space permits, often in shifts. Only officers have proper cabins, and even these are tiny by modern standards. The constant motion of the ship, combined with the perpetual dampness and poor ventilation, creates an environment where seasickness is common, even among experienced sailors. At night, the ship takes on a different character. The creaking of timbers grows louder, the darkness broken only by the occasional lantern and the stars above. The night watch maintains vigilant guard, watching for other ships, potential hazards, and monitoring weather changes. The ship's bell marks the watches, its sound carrying across the water as one of the few regular markers of time in the endless sea. The epic journey of Vasco da Gama unfolded like a great maritime drama in multiple acts, each presenting its own unique challenges and perils. What began as an ambitious expedition would transform into a 2-year saga of survival, diplomacy, and determination. After departing Lisbon, the fleet's first major test came in the Atlantic waters. Instead of hugging the African coast as previous expeditions had done, da Gama made a bold decision to swing far out into the Atlantic in a wide arc. This innovative route, known as the Volta do Mar, took advantage of prevailing winds and currents. But it also meant sailing through treacherous waters far from any sight of land for 3 months. The crews endured massive storms that threatened to shatter their vessels, while fighting constant battles against scurvy and deteriorating food supplies. By the time they reached the Cape Verde Islands, their first major stop, many were already questioning the wisdom of this venture. The approach to the Cape of Good Hope brought some of the expedition's most harrowing moments. Here, where the Atlantic and Indian Oceans clash in a perpetual battle, the fleet faced waves as tall as their mainmasts and winds that threatened to dash them against the African coast. Da Gama's decision to wait for favorable winds rather than rush through the passage likely saved the expedition, though it meant weeks of anxious waiting in Storm Bay. When they finally rounded the Cape on November 22nd, they had accomplished what many considered the most dangerous part of their journey. Sailing up the eastern African coast, the expedition entered truly uncharted waters. Each port brought new challenges in diplomacy and trade. In Mozambique, their first significant contact with the Muslim world, initial friendly relations quickly soured when local rulers realized these were not fellow Muslims, but Christian competitors. The expedition narrowly escaped an ambush, learning a harsh lesson about the complex political and religious dynamics they would face. The stops at Mombasa and Malindi proved crucial turning points. In Mombasa, the expedition again barely escaped a trap set by hostile Arab traders. However, in Malindi, they finally found a crucial ally. The local sultan, seeing an opportunity to strengthen his position against rival ports, provided da Gama with an experienced pilot who knew the route to India. This pilot, Ahmad ibn Majid, though some historians debate his identity, possessed the crucial knowledge of the monsoon winds that would carry them across the Indian Ocean. The 23-day crossing of the Indian Ocean represented a leap into the absolute unknown for European sailors. Using the monsoon winds, the fleet made the fastest crossing of this ocean recorded to that time. However, these weeks were marked by increasing anxiety as supplies dwindled and diseases spread through the crew. The sight of the Indian coast on May 20th, 1498, marked not just their arrival, but the successful linking of Europe and Asia by sea for the first time in history. The arrival in Calicut, then one of the world's greatest trading ports, brought new challenges. Initial misunderstandings were comic. The Portuguese mistook Hindu temples for Christian churches and believed they had found Eastern Christians. However, the situation quickly became tense. Da Gama's modest trade goods were considered insulting by local merchants used to dealing in gold. Complex negotiations with the Zamorin, local ruler, were further complicated by hostile Arab merchants who recognized the existential threat these European interlopers represented to their trading monopoly. The return journey proved as challenging as the outward voyage. Disease claimed many lives, including da Gama's brother Paulo. The fleet was forced to burn one ship for lack of crew to sail it. When they finally reached Lisbon, only 55 of the original 170 men had survived. However, the small cargo of spices they carried was enough to pay for the entire expedition many times over, proving the commercial viability of the route. This journey wasn't just a series of nautical achievements. It was a complex narrative of human endurance, cultural collision, and the birth of the first truly global trade network. Each phase of the voyage contributed to fundamentally altering the balance of world power and commerce. The voyage of Vasco da Gama is exceptionally well documented through multiple primary sources that survived the centuries. The most significant account comes from the detailed journal of an anonymous sailor, known as a Journal of the First Voyage of Vasco da Gama. This invaluable document provides day-by-day observations of the journey, including weather conditions, navigational challenges, and encounters with local populations. The scribe meticulously recorded astronomical observations, wind patterns, and detailed descriptions of the African and Indian coastlines. Portuguese royal chronicler João de Barros, in his masterwork Décadas da Ásia, offers comprehensive accounts of the preparations for the voyage and its diplomatic implications. His writings reveal the extensive planning behind the expedition, including the selection of crew members and the strategic positioning of interpreters like Fernão Martins, who proved crucial during encounters with Arabic-speaking traders. The navigation logs showcase the remarkable precision of Portuguese maritime technology for the time. These documents detail the use of astronomical instruments like the quadrant and astrolabe, which allowed da Gama's fleet to determine their position with unprecedented accuracy. The preserved cartographic materials, including the famous Cantino planisphere, created just a few years after the voyage, incorporate the geographical knowledge gained during the expedition. Letters exchanged between King Manuel I and his representatives in India provide fascinating insights into the commercial and diplomatic aspects of the journey. These correspondences reveal the complex negotiations with local rulers, particularly the Zamorin of Calicut, and the strategic importance of establishing trading posts along the African coast. The surviving manifests of cargo and trade goods offer a window into the economic dimensions of the voyage. These lists detail not only the precious metals and textiles brought from Portugal, but also document the first samples of Indian spices, particularly black pepper and cinnamon, that would transform European commerce. Archaeological evidence from discovered shipwrecks along the African coast has corroborated many details found in written sources, including the types of navigational instruments used and the construction methods of Portuguese vessels. These physical artifacts provide tangible connections to this pioneering maritime expedition that opened the first direct sea route between Europe and India. Vasco da Gama's voyage to India triggered a seismic shift in global power dynamics that would reshape the world for centuries to come. What began as a commercial expedition to secure direct access to the spice trade evolved into one of history's most transformative moments. The establishment of this maritime route fundamentally altered the economic, political, and social fabric of multiple continents. The immediate economic impact was devastating for the established Arab-Venetian trade networks. For centuries, Arab merchants had maintained a profitable monopoly over the spice trade, controlling the overland routes from India through the Middle East, while Venice dominated Mediterranean distribution. Portuguese ships now bypassed this entire network, sailing directly to the source. Within decades, Venice's commercial supremacy crumbled, and Arab trading posts along the traditional Silk Road began to decline. The Portuguese colonial era emerged as a direct consequence of da Gama's success. Portugal established a string of strategic fortified trading posts, or feitorias, along the African coast and throughout the Indian Ocean. Cities like Goa, Malacca, and Hormuz became crucial nodes in a vast Portuguese maritime empire. This network of trading posts evolved into full-fledged colonies, introducing European administrative systems, Christianity, and Portuguese language and culture across 3 continents. The transformation of global trade routes was unprecedented. The ancient Silk Road and Mediterranean trade networks, which had dominated commerce for millennia, were suddenly rendered obsolete. The center of global trade shifted from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic Ocean. Portuguese caravels, designed for long-distance ocean travel, revolutionized maritime commerce. The new sea routes allowed for larger cargo volumes, more efficient transportation, and dramatically reduced costs for European merchants. This maritime revolution triggered massive wealth transfers between continents. Previously, unimaginable quantities of gold from Africa, spices from India, and later silver from the Americas flowed into European markets. This influx of wealth fundamentally altered European society, fueling the Renaissance and early capitalism. Meanwhile, Portuguese control of strategic maritime choke points allowed them to impose heavy taxes and trading conditions on Asian merchants, gradually draining wealth from traditional trading powers. The ecological and biological impact was equally profound. The Portuguese maritime network facilitated the first large-scale global exchange of crops, animals, and diseases. New World crops like maize and cassava were introduced to Africa and Asia, while Asian spices and fruits found their way to the Americas. This Columbian exchange, as it would later be called, permanently altered agricultural patterns and diets across continents. The expedition's success also sparked a race for maritime supremacy among European powers. The Portuguese example inspired other nations, particularly Spain, Holland, and England, to develop their own oceanic empires. This competition would define international relations for the next 4 centuries, leading to the era of European colonialism that would reshape global demographics, economics, and cultural patterns. Perhaps most significantly, da Gama's voyage marked the beginning of the first truly global economy. The interconnected trading network established by the Portuguese created economic interdependencies between continents that had previously had minimal contact. This new economic reality laid the groundwork for modern globalization, international trade practices, and the complex web of commercial relationships that characterize our world today. The late 15th century represented far more than just an age of maritime exploration. It marked a pivotal moment in human civilization where medieval Europe was transforming into something entirely new. Vasco da Gama's voyage emerged from this crucible of change, where multiple revolutionary forces converged to create the perfect conditions for such an ambitious undertaking. Navigation and cartography underwent a remarkable revolution during this period. Portuguese mariners had developed sophisticated methods for calculating latitude using the astrolabe and quadrant, while their understanding of Atlantic wind patterns had reached unprecedented levels of sophistication. The creation of portoland charts, which provided detailed coastal information combined with astronomical tables adapted from Arab sources, gave navigators tools that their predecessors could only have dreamed of. The establishment of Henry the Navigator's school at Sagres had created generations of skilled navigators who combined practical experience with theoretical knowledge. The Renaissance humanist philosophy played a crucial role in driving European expansion. This new worldview emphasized human potential and achievement, breaking away from medieval religious constraints. Humanist scholars rediscovered classical Greek and Roman geographical works, including Ptolemy's writings, which sparked intense interest in exploration. The Renaissance ideal of the universal man, skilled in both practical and theoretical matters, found perfect expression in the navigator-explorers who combined scientific knowledge with practical seamanship. Naval technology underwent a revolutionary transformation that made long-distance ocean voyages possible. The development of the caravel represented a quantum leap in shipbuilding. These vessels combined the best elements of Northern European and Mediterranean ship design, featuring a revolutionary combination of square and lateen sails that allowed ships to sail closer to the wind. Innovations in hull design, including the introduction of skeleton-first construction and enhanced storage capabilities, enabled vessels to remain at sea for unprecedented periods. Advances in artillery and naval warfare also meant these ships could defend themselves effectively against pirates and hostile forces. The competition between emerging European powers provided crucial impetus for exploration. Portugal, despite its small size, had emerged as a pioneer in maritime exploration, but faced increasing rivalry from Castile, later Spain. The Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 had attempted to divide the non-European world between these two powers, creating an urgency to explore and claim new territories. Meanwhile, other European nations watched with growing interest, leading to an arms race in maritime technology and exploration capabilities. This period also saw a revolution in commercial thinking. Medieval economic restrictions were giving way to more sophisticated financial instruments and trading practices. Italian banking houses had developed complex credit systems, while new forms of maritime insurance made risky voyages more financially viable. The rise of joint stock companies would soon follow, providing the financial infrastructure for long-distance trade. The intellectual climate of the time was equally transformative. Universities were moving away from purely theological concerns to embrace practical knowledge. Mathematics, astronomy, and geography gained new prominence. The printing press, recently introduced to Europe, allowed for unprecedented sharing of knowledge, including sailing directions and geographical information. Maps and navigational treatises could now be mass-produced and distributed widely. This was also a period of significant technological cross-pollination. European navigators eagerly adopted Arab astronomical instruments and Indian Ocean navigational techniques. Portuguese shipwrights incorporated elements from various maritime traditions into their vessel designs. This openness to foreign technical knowledge, combined with European innovations, created a powerful synthesis that made long-distance ocean navigation possible. The Portuguese court, under successive forward-thinking monarchs, had created an institutional framework that supported exploration. They established a systematic approach to gathering and analyzing geographical information, creating what might be called the world's first state-sponsored research and development program focused on navigation and exploration. All these factors combined to create a unique historical moment where the technical means, philosophical motivation, economic incentives, and institutional support all aligned to make Vasco da Gama's voyage possible. It was a true inflection point in human civilization, where medieval isolation gave way to the first genuine wave of globalization. What if history had taken a different course? Let's explore some fascinating alternative scenarios that could have dramatically altered the path of world history. Imagine if Vasco da Gama's fleet had met with disaster rounding the Cape of Good Hope, where treacherous currents and violent storms had already claimed countless ships. Would another European power have succeeded in reaching India first? Perhaps the Ottoman Empire would have maintained its stranglehold on East-West trade for centuries longer, potentially altering the entire trajectory of European economic development. Consider the delicate balance of timing. If da Gama had arrived in Calicut just a few months earlier or later, he might have encountered different monsoon patterns or political circumstances. The success of his mission hinged on countless variables: the accuracy of Arab navigational knowledge, the cooperation of local pilots, the crucial decision to swing wide into the Atlantic before turning east. Each of these decisions was a turning point where history could have veered in radically different directions. What if the Zamorin of Calicut had reacted differently to these Portuguese interlopers? A more hostile reception might have closed Indian ports to European traders for decades. Alternatively, a more enthusiastic welcome might have accelerated the pace of East-West exchange, potentially transforming the nature of early colonialism. The technological aspects present their own intriguing what-ifs. If Portuguese shipwrights hadn't perfected the caravel design, combining Mediterranean and Atlantic sailing technologies, would the voyage have been possible at all? If Arab navigators had chosen to share less of their crucial knowledge about Indian Ocean wind patterns, how much longer might it have taken Europeans to establish reliable routes to Asia? These questions invite us to consider how fragile the thread of historical events can be. The success or failure of da Gama's voyage rested not just on naval skill and technology, but on diplomatic finesse, cultural understanding, and often simple luck. Each decision point represents a moment where world history could have taken a dramatically different turn. Now that you've journeyed with us through this pivotal moment in history, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What aspects of Vasco da Gama's voyage surprised you the most? Could you imagine living through such a transformative period in human history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Modern Age Chronicles for more fascinating historical narratives that shaped our world. Ring that notification bell to stay updated on our latest historical adventures. Here's a question to ponder and discuss in the comments. If you could interview Vasco da Gama about one aspect of his historic journey, what would you ask him? Perhaps about the moments of doubt during the voyage, or his first impressions upon reaching India. Share this video with friends and family who love history. Let's start a conversation about how these age of discovery voyages continue to influence our world today. Remember, each like, share, and comment helps us bring more of these incredible historical stories to life. Join our growing community of history enthusiasts at Modern Age Chronicles, where we explore the moments that changed the course of human civilization.